Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chelsea. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, I want to inspire, and I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about finding your voice, about finding your strength and being the best person emotionally that you can be. My guest today is Eve Strongheart, and we are talking about her book, The Woman Next Door. The conversation is a little heavy this morning, but it needs to be talked about. A woman who finds the strength to leave an emotional, abusive marriage. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about Eve. Eve Strongheart is the pen name of a woman who found herself hopelessly entangled in an emotionally abusive marriage. The real woman hiding behind that name has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in counseling. She spent many years working in the field of drug and alcohol counseling and mental health treatment. Nevertheless, the confusing dynamic of her marriage drove her close to the point of self-destruction. After finding her way out of that situation and getting her life back, she shares the story of her experience and the hope of helping other women. So good morning, Eve. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story today.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Now, I love that you are sharing on such a topic because we really need to hear success stories and to motivate fellow women and men that are going through that. Now, let me ask you this, though. In your own words, Eve, who are you?
Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
I called my book The Woman Next Door because I'm just a regular person. I am educated, but I'm really just a regular woman, and my situation really caught me by surprise.
Now, do you think that for the woman who's nodding her head and saying, yes, I never thought that I would be in this situation, is this something that we're finding is actually becoming more commonplace?
You know, I don't think it's becoming more commonplace, but I think women are starting to talk about it. I think that emotional abuse and the systems that perpetuate it have been there for a long time. And I think because it's a hidden problem, I think a lot of women are suffering in silence. And women are just starting to talk about it, which I think is a really good thing.
Absolutely. Now, do you think that your education, the counseling, the psychology, do you think that helped you or even allowed you to at some point see things differently and realize things need to change?
You know, actually, I think it was a bit of a handicap because I thought that, gee, I have all this education, I'm a kind and caring person, I've got all these skills, I should be able to fix this problem. And so it actually, I think, contributed to me staying much longer than I should have because I thought I can help, I'm strong, I'm tough, I can handle this. And it wasn't until things got really bad that I realized, oh my goodness, I am way in deep water here and I need to get out.
And I could just see someone saying, yeah, that's me. I thought I could change it, and I got in a little deeper than I thought. Well, listeners, it is time for us to take a very short break, but don't worry, when we get back, we will definitely continue to have this conversation about the woman next door dealing with emotional abuse. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. Today we're talking about emotional abuse, in this case, in a marriage. The author today is Eve Strongheart. Her book, The Woman Next Door. Now, Eve, I love the title of the book because to me it's just that, you know what, it could be the woman next door, across the street, locally, the person that you're looking at. Now, when you were writing, did you find that the title came to you first, or did you write and the title kind of developed out of your writings?
Well, when I was thinking about my situation, I realized that there were so many women like me out there. So the title just came to me very naturally, that I wanted to let women know that it's okay to talk about this because there's so many of us out there, and the woman who lives right across the street from you could be having the exact same problems. But unless we talk, unless we share with each other, we'll never know that.
That is so true. Now, why did you feel that this was the book for right now? Why write this book right now?
Well, I'm a writer, and so for me, writing was a way to try and make sense of my whole experience. So that was what I was trying to get out of it. But I also realized that, my goodness, this was so self-destructive for me, and maybe I could help somebody else. And that was really what led me into the counseling field, was I wanted to see if I could help somebody else. So I thought, my goodness, if my book can help one other woman, then it's worth writing.
And I know that people think that when we say that it's kind of a canned answer, but it really is true. You just want to be able to share your story, to help just one person. A million people, that's awesome. But if it's just one person, you feel as though you've helped and that you have really walked in your path on that. I have to agree with you on that one. Now, you decided to use a pen name instead of using your birth name. Why did you, even though I think I understand why, but why did you decide to take that route?
Well, the number one reason was it was really important for me to do no harm. I didn't want to hurt my ex-husband. I didn't want to embarrass his children. I didn't want to hurt anybody that might be associated with it. And so that was my number one reason. And second of all, in my book, I do disclose the fact that I'm a person in my own personal recovery in a 12-step fellowship. And those 12-step fellowships require that people keep themselves anonymous at press, radio, and film. So that was another reason. I was just trying to honor the rules of the 12-step fellowship, which I mentioned that I'm a part of.
Now, I absolutely love that. Have you found that when you are being mindful of others and being respectful of the decisions that they have made, do you find that it is freeing in any way for yourself, even though you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, the staying anonymous and being mindful of others actually helps you?
Well, yes, because I don't think anything good comes from intentionally hurting another. I believe God calls us to be kind to each other, and so I always try and keep that first and foremost in my mind. And some people want to hurt somebody that's hurt them, but I don't see any benefit to even myself from doing that. So,
right. Now, the title of your book, The Woman Next Door, you could have chosen anything, and I think you kind of hinted on it a little bit before. Why the title, The Woman Next Door?
Well, I wanted to reach out to the average woman because sometimes women hear about domestic violence and it's very extreme, and there's broken arms, and sometimes women even get murdered, and that's very dramatic. But my situation wasn't that dramatic. It was my husband hit me with words. And so I think that is a much more common problem out there, and so I wanted women to realize, okay, even if your situation is, quote, not that bad, you're still being hurt. And it's important to take a look at what that's doing to you.
Now, with emotional abuse versus physical abuse, and as you were saying, physical abuse, understand that's the woman who ends up, injured or harmed, who wears the sunglasses indoors, or, I ran into the door type of excuse, and you really do start to suspect something. But with emotional abuse, there tends not to be that physical scar. But for someone who thinks that they may be going through emotional abuse, is there anything that they should be looking for? Like, are there certain words or phrases? What are the red flags?
For me, the first red flag, which I didn't pay enough attention to, was when I started doubting myself. I started having less confidence. And what I've learned is that emotional abuse, the first part of the woman that gets targeted is her confidence and her independence. So any relationship that makes me less strong, less confident, less vibrant, I need to take a look at that.
That is a nugget, because I'm sure there's someone that's saying, she might be onto something that makes me feel less confident. Now, what if there's a woman that says, well, you know what, Eve, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not a confident person in the first place, or my self-esteem isn't perhaps as high as yours. Do you have any advice for the person who's already kind of struggling with their self-confidence?
Well, actually, that's a great question, because I think men who want to be in control often pick women who are vulnerable in some way. And so I was vulnerable because of circumstances in my life. But I think a lot of times men are attracted to women who want to let the man lead and want to let the man make the decisions. So I do think that even so, I believe all relationships should build us up, whether it's a relationship with our friends, our female friends, or our husbands. That we should be, maybe we are fragile, maybe we are insecure, but a good husband would be encouraging us and strengthening us and saying, you can do it, and come on, let me help you, I'll show you how, and kind of the saying, teaching somebody to fish instead of just giving them a fish.
Right.
I think in a healthy relationship, the husband would be encouraging his partner to be a little bit more courageous and still maybe taking care of her, but in a way that makes her feel more secure instead of less secure.
I love that. Make her feel more secure instead of less secure, because that really is. That alone is an issue and a concern that many women have, is that they just don't feel as validated or as secure, as important, as valued in the relationship, that it becomes a little one-sided. So I can definitely agree with you with that. I love it. Well, Eve, it is almost time for us to go to break. So if you could please, can you remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we follow you online, or how do we keep up with you?
Well, my book is called The Woman Next Door by Eve Strongheart, and it is available through Amazon. It's on Kindle and various other e-readers. It should be fairly widely available.
Yeah. All righty, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for a Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Eve Strongheart, and she's written the book, The Woman Next Door. Now, Eve, we've kind of touched on it a little bit before, but I want to ask you this question this way. So many women have similar stories, but sometimes we hear things differently depending on our age. Do you think that your story is relevant to all women, regardless of their age?
Yes, I do. I think that younger women sometimes have strengths that older women don't have, but they can still become entangled in these confusing relationships. I remember a younger woman asking me a question. She was trying to get me to write about my book, and she said, "Can you describe the first time when you learned to put yourself first?" And I thought that was a very millennial question. And the truth of the answer was I hadn't learned to do it yet.
Yeah.
Putting myself first was something I hadn't learned to do, because I think women of my age group and our mothers, we were taught to be the caregivers of the family and the nurturers of the family and to give. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a mother and a caregiver and a nurturer. It's when we are being belittled and beaten down and there's no love and gratitude for what we give, but instead there's criticism and abuse. That's the problem.
Wow, what a powerful question. Wow, that is just, I love that. I'm glad that you were able to have that conversation with her. And in giving your answer, I think that it also gives her some context or some framework to understand perhaps her mother or her grandmother or those women that are of a different generation, and understand that their sacrifice wasn't because they felt necessarily that they were less than, but that they were trying to be all that they could be according to the rules of society during their time. So I love that. I, too, am in that generation where it's kind of one foot in, 1 foot out kind of thing, where it's you do sacrifice for your children and you do make sure that family comes first, but then we have that little toe over that says, but I also need to learn about self-care and self-love and having me time and having spa time for mama, and dad needs to wash dishes tonight. So I can definitely understand that question. Now, how did you find that your faith was able to work with you or to help you get through this situation? Did your faith in God or your goals for living, your best Christian life impact you during this situation?
Very much so, but perhaps not in the way you might think. My faith, I have a deep faith, and my faith has made me a strong person. And at first I thought, well, God wants me to help this man who has these significant challenges, and God's made me strong, and I have a connection, a deep faith, so I thought at first God wanted me to practice the Christian values of forgiveness and charity and turning the other cheek. But over time, as I realized that I was starting to lose myself and I was starting to have dreams of, boy, I wish I could come down with cancer and die, then I realized, whoa, there's a problem here. And
there's a problem, right?
Yeah, I realized God does not want me to destroy myself. So that's when I started realizing that the relationship was slowly destroying me. And I realized that I had to be careful with my faith that I didn't get tangled up in spiritual pride, where I'm thinking that I am the only person that could help this man who obviously has so much to learn. And I had to realize God can do that. And if it's destroying me, my first responsibility has to be to taking care of myself. And that, that he was God's child too. And so my nurturings, I had to let go a little and realize, okay, this is destroying me. Fantasies about dying are not good. And ultimately God's in charge. So I had to be careful that I didn't take too much responsibility, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. When you mentioned that, and listeners, you guys have heard me say this before, and I've even shared this with my client base, is that remember when you fly and the flight attendant or stewardess says, should the oxygen drop from the overhead, put your mask on first before you tend to those around you. And every time I fly and she says that, to me, that kind of reminds me of everyone is important, but if you want to care for others, you have to make sure that you are okay first. Not that you're more important than the other person, but that you have to make sure your oxygen is flowing so that you can continue to help those around you. I totally get what you're saying, and it is just so wonderful that you have reminded women that we must take care of ourselves so that we can continue to love on those that are around us and be in the healthiest relationships that we can be in. I love it. That was such a great answer. Now, you wrote about how your husband was often cruel to you. So many women are probably asking, well, how do you keep from, hating him, from not wishing bad, evil things, happen to him? How did you keep yourself from going down that path?
That comes back to my faith in God and my Christian values. I know that hate is not what God wants me to be feeling. And so it was, it's a choice. You can choose not to allow yourself to indulge in that. And there was one brief moment where I was so hurt and so upset that I found myself feeling that brief spark of hate, and it terrified me. And I actually called a girlfriend and said, what do I do? I think I'm going to start hating him. I was frightened of that feeling because that is just poison for the soul. And that was another reason that, okay, if I'm turning into somebody I don't want to be, then it's time to end this. I have to admit the fact that I'm just a human being who has limits. And so, because hate is a very negative emotion, and it just poisons the person who's feeling it. And I didn't want to feel it.
Now, for the person that, and asking this, it's double-sided as well because of your education. For the person who is in that situation and they can feel the hateful emotions start to kind of bubble up inside, we tend to tell people, well, if you're getting angry, walk away from the situation, reassess, ask yourself, all these questions, how we do. But in the moment, real life, did you find that your education helped you to be able to walk away or to de-escalate the situation? Or did you find that, what, I'm just a woman in this situation. I'm not someone, with a degree in counseling and all of that. I am the woman first in this situation. Or did you find that your education really assisted you?
No, I hate to say it, but it really didn't. I'm just a woman, and I'm a human being, and I have feelings. And what helped me walk away more than anything was fear, because what I do know is that emotional abuse can turn into physical abuse.
Yeah.
And it was awareness of that just because this person is being cruel and unfair to me, if I fight back, this could escalate.
Yeah.
And so it was really an awareness of that helped me walk away. It's like, what the person is saying or doing may be completely wrong, but I don't want it to escalate to physical violence.
Right.
So that really is what helped me walk away.
Because that really is a fear, I'm sure, for so many women. They don't know how to walk away, but they know that if they say anything or if they do anything, that it could escalate to physical violence, and they just feel kind of trapped in that moment. So thank you for that answer. Now, you write about how marriage counseling did not help your particular situation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And the flip side of that is, if marriage counseling didn't work, what do you suggest that women do?
Well, I think counseling could help if you found the right counselor. But what I would say is it's very important to make sure you find a counselor who really understands your issues and what you're dealing with. And If you don't, and you just go to any old counselor so I would say meet with a counselor first, talk to them privately, make sure they really seem to be sympathetic to what you're trying to talk about. Because often in these situations, the man makes it sound like, oh, the woman's half crazy or she's whatever. And so she can become the identified problem in the counseling. It's like, oh, my wife is hysterical. Well, why is she hysterical? And so I think it's very important that a woman try to meet with the counselor privately first and find out, do they understand the issues? Because if they don't and you just walk into it blind, you could find that the counselor is accepting the husband's interpretation of what's going on, and it could actually give him more fuel for the fire. Well, the counselor said that you just need to calm down or whatever.
You make a very valid point. I know that that's something that many times in couples counseling that the husband will express to me on the first, not the initial consultation, but on the first couples session, is that, well, you know, my wife made this appointment, and you're a woman, so I think that you're going to side with her. And that's a very valid concern. And it's, well, you're a man. If you were to go see a man, do you think that the man would automatically side with you simply because you're a man? Or do you find the perfect, like you said, that counselor or therapist that says, professionally, I don't side with either person? So I really think that you've hit the nail on the head there about how that can definitely help. I love it. Now, it is almost time for us to go to break, Eve, but I want to make sure that everyone is reminded again, what is the title of your book, and where can they pick up a copy?
Well, it's Eve Strongheart, and the title of the book is The Woman Next Door. It is available through Amazon. It's available through Kindle and other ebook sources, Smashwords, which is, I believe, an Apple platform, to name a few.
Gotcha. Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can go and pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. My guest today is Eve Strongheart, and the title of her book is The Woman Next Door. What are we talking about? Emotional abuse today. In this case, it happened to have been in a marriage. But I think that we can listen to this and we can really and truly get some nuggets of wisdom, be it that you are in a marriage or you're just in kind of the dating stages. Pay attention to those red flags, and I think these nuggets of wisdom here are definitely going to help. Now, Eve, the next question I have for you is how does your story fit into the context of the Me Too movement? Or maybe I should ask, does it fit into the context of the Me Too movement?
Well, you know, I wrote my book because I was trying to sort out what happened to me. And it's just kind of a coincidence that its timing coincides with the Me Too movement. But I do think they are related because ultimately a lot of the issues in my marriage came from some fundamental beliefs that were very patriarchal, that a man's in charge and a woman is less than, and those acceptance of domination as just a normal thing. And I challenge that because I would remind the listener that God made woman from Adam's rib to walk beside him, not from his foot. And I think that patriarchy keeps women in a lower than, less valued position. And that's where the abuse, that's the foundation of the abusive dynamic. People don't, when there's equals, people don't abuse each other. So I think it's really, women are starting to talk about this. I think it's very pervasive. And I think the world is slowly starting to change. And that's a good thing.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. From the rib, not from the foot. I love it. Now, have you had any more insights into your situation, or just in your day-to-day living, have you gathered more information when it comes to dealing with emotional abuse and how to better be a survivor as time has passed?
Well, looking back on this, I realize how much the outside circumstances of my life made me vulnerable. And there's a lot of ways a woman could be vulnerable. She could be an immigrant, which I was. She could be financially vulnerable because she's staying home taking care of young children, therefore she has no money, which often translates to no power. Or there could be other ways where a woman is isolated or alone. What I learned also was that I looked back on some of my family of origin issues, and I realized that those set me up for what happened to me. And that's something I'm still exploring, how the dynamics in my parents' marriage made me vulnerable to winding up in this situation. And that's not to blame, because I love my parents.
Right, of course.
They did the best they could. But again, there's that system of patriarchy, and my mother definitely did not have equal power in the marriage, and that kind of set me up for some of that. And now the other thing I've learned is I look now for compassion and kindness as the two attributes I look for first in anybody I meet.
Right.
Are they compassionate? Are they kind?
Do you think that each generation, as far as women go, each generation, we kind of get a little bit more freedom, a little bit more power, a little bit more knowledge? Do you think that women are doing a good job at passing on our life lessons to the next generation?
I think we're starting to. I think it's a huge shift that needed to happen, and I do believe it is happening. But I think it's happening more slowly, because I think women might have achieved the right to vote, and we might be allowed to work outside the home, and we might be allowed to have bank accounts. But a lot of these emotionally abusive dynamics can still be going on under the surface. They happen in private. And so, yes and no. I think things are changing, but not as much as we might like to think they are.
And kind of going down that same vein, do you think that when a woman is a little bit more financially independent, that it allows her to make better decisions when it comes to her relationship, and that she will not be as vulnerable, be it that it's physical abuse or emotional abuse or even trying to, incorporate financial abuse from her spouse? Do you think that when a woman is in a better position, that she can make better decisions?
Absolutely. I think women need to claim their power, and that can be simple things like asking to have or insisting on having your own bank account, learning how to drive, having your own personal credit history, every opportunity to have some self-identity that isn't totally entangled in your relationship with a man is very important. Working outside of the home, even just a tiny amount. What abusive men have a tendency to do is isolate women, and they don't want them outside of the home or having those outside connections. Maintaining a connection with family and friends and insisting on it. All these things empower a woman.
I love it. I love it. Now, if you could give a bit of advice to a woman that may find herself in a similar situation, what bit would that be?
Well, I would tell a woman that if you identify these bad, negative patterns happening, get out early, because it doesn't get better. You probably can't change it, and it's only going to get worse. And if you're confused, I would tell a woman, find one person you can trust, preferably another woman. Give her a little bit of trust and see what she does with it. Like, talk to her about the problems just a little and see what she does with it. The most important thing, does she keep your confidence? Because I have heard of women friends confronting the man of, the husband of some friend of theirs, because, oh, what he's doing isn't right, but that actually gets the woman more abuse. You need a woman friend that will listen to you and keep your confidence so you can explore what's going on in safety.
I love it. I love it. And it's so important to have that person in your life, most definitely, most definitely. Well, we only have a few moments left before the show is over. I can't believe it, but it is time for us to go to break. So if you would, please, can you remind everyone again, Eve, what is the name of your book and where can we pick up a copy?
My name is Eve Strongheart, and my book is called The Woman Next Door. It's available on Amazon and the ebook version on Kindle and Apple's Smashwords and other channels that I can't think of right now.
Not a problem. Well, listeners, you know where you can pick up a copy of the book on one of your favorite platforms. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Eve, I absolutely have enjoyed talking to you about your book, The Woman Next Door. One of the things that I like to do, though, is pick the brain of the authors that are on the show for our aspiring authors out there. So I'd love to ask you some questions about your process. One question that I always ask is, when it comes to your writing environment, do you find that you need it to be really, really quiet, like you want to go off to the log cabin, you lock yourself in your room, or do you go to Starbucks? What's your ideal situation when it comes, or atmosphere when it comes to writing?
Well, for me, I found the most important thing is I need to find what time of the day my creative juices are flowing. And for me, that's first thing in the morning. So I'm fortunate to have a job that I work evenings and nights. So shortly after I would get up, I would sit on my couch and look out the window at the birds and the trees, and I would write. And I need quiet, and I need to not be distracted. But the most important thing for me was really the time of the day, which is surprising, but... So I can totally understand that sometimes, and especially depending on your mood or what you have to do that day, perhaps you need that flexibility and know that it's okay, that if you usually write in the morning, but this morning perhaps you're not feeling your best, then you could write in the evening, and that's okay. But to have enough, be in tune with yourself enough to know when the proper time is, I love that. Now, we have a certain understanding as a country, as a culture, of what success means. And some people agree with it, some people don't. But my question to you is, literary success, what would that look like to you? How do you know when you've achieved it? And is it something that you think everyone is shooting for? Well, that's an interesting question. For me, I said that I wrote this book because I wanted to help someone else. If I found out that I helped one or two people, I would be satisfied. It would be worth the effort it took to write it. As far as generally writing success, I think people want to be heard. They want to be able to tell their story and share it with another. And I think we all have interesting stories, so I would encourage anyone who has the desire to write to go for it, because we are each having an amazing journey,
right?
And it's good to share it.
And my last question for you for the day is this: when is the best time, if you think that there's a book inside of you, or you kind of been jotting down some notes, when is the best time to get started writing your new book?
I think right away. find the day that you have some free time and just start. It was really important to me to just start. Sometimes I didn't even know where I was going, but I just started writing, and the writing just started to flow. And I needed to not be too critical. I write very rapidly. I just let it come out. And I go back later and I worry about the grammar or the spelling. But in the beginning, it's like it's letting the river start flowing. I just try and not edit myself and just let that inner voice come out.
I love it. Now, listeners, you guys have heard me talk about freestyle writing before when I said don't edit yourself. Just let it out. Get it in your journal. See, it's important. It is awesome. It really and truly does help, because so many times we get so caught up in the editing that we lose the thought that we have trying to make sure that everything is just so. Just get it out. Well, let me tell you something, Eve Strongheart. I am glad that you just let it flow. Thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your book, The Woman Next Door, with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
And listeners, thank you as well. I appreciate your tuning in and listening to Daily Spark with Dr. Angela each and every day. And as always, may you find the Lord's grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.